Welcome back to the Google Ads Lead Gen Show. My name is Michelle Kopp from Level 28 Media.
And my name is Dean Hua with Sachi Studio.
And in today's podcast video episode, we are going to be talking all about auditing your Google Ads account. We're going to be talking about like a full top to bottom audit, what we typically look at when we are looking at new accounts that are new to us. And we'll take you through all the different areas and settings that we look out for, as well as some huge red flags that we identify when we do audits. So, Dean, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and talk about the biggest mistakes, and let's start with the root of Google AdWords or Google Ads, keywords and negative keywords. Take it away.
Sure. So I'll just give my initial thoughts based on my experience having probably audited over 100 accounts at this point. Let's talk about keywords and then negative keywords, and then you can just piggyback off of whatever I'm saying. I think the biggest mistake with keywords in general is there's still a heavy reliance on broad match. I think there's a time and a place for broad match, phrase match, and exact match, but a lot of the accounts I'm looking at, there's too much reliance on broad match, and it's as if some of these accounts or the people who are holding or running these accounts, they don't know that phrase match and exact match actually exist. Conversely, you can go to the extreme of it, and some people are relying too heavily on phrase or exact match. Where if you're relying too heavily on phrase and exact match, you may not be getting enough traffic. And if you're actually asking yourself, well, Dean, we're not getting enough conversions, what should we look at? Maybe you want to consider broad match. On the flip side of it, I think one of my biggest pet peeves with negative keywords is I see this with a lot of agencies. When they start running a campaign, they let the traffic start accumulating before they can decide which negative keywords to start uploading. The way I do things is even before a campaign starts, I do my research on which negative keywords to block out. I build that into a library and I upload it before the campaign starts. And so what I found, especially working with a lot of businesses, is if you can be very proactive with having a negative keyword library before the campaign starts, you can actually save your client a lot of money. Theoretically, if you're spending, let's say, $5,000 a month, 50% of that ad spend could, in theory, go to trash keywords. And so rather than waiting to accumulate, all of these negative keywords as they come along, why not just be more proactive about it and uploading that negative keyword library in advance, therefore saving your clients 50% of their ad spend. So those are my initial thoughts. What sort of thoughts do you have?
Yeah, so piggybacking off of what you're talking about with broad match, I fully agree. I've audited a bunch of accounts where all I see are broad match keywords. I used to actually be in the camp of being 100% against broad match, but then over time, I'm noticing that broad match is getting more relevant, but it still needs to be ironed out in terms of putting negative keywords in place in order to get that traffic to be more qualified and in order to get the best intent for what you're trying to pay for. So I'm not completely against broad match. I think that there's a time and place and budget if you have the right budget to be testing with it. But a lot of the clients that we tend to work with tend to be more on the smaller scale, less than $10,000 a month. So we don't have a lot of time or or patience in order to be using broad match and adding a bunch of negative keywords. So that's why we tend to go with more exact match, phrase match. But like you'd mentioned, a lot of times some of these methods or these match types can limit you, especially if you're going like all in on on exact match. Then you don't have opportunity for like keyword discovery. And what you were talking to about adding negative keywords at the onset of the campaign, it is really important to have a list. I have like a master negative list that I know is not going to work for most accounts. And I'll sift through that before I even launch an account. Keywords such as like PDF downloads, if we're doing lead gen, free, free something. Sometimes you have to be careful with the word free.
Cheap.
Sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
cheap, affordable, especially if you're going after more like, premium services, you don't want necessarily people that are price shopping. And that tends to be a common concern that clients tend to have when they get, leads coming from their campaign. So they don't want, a lot of them don't want that type of clientele. But beyond that, the proactiveness of adding negative keywords on a consistent basis, you and I both know the challenge that we're facing right now, and the concern that a lot of paid search marketers are have. It has to do with the fact that the search query reports are pretty much eliminating quite a bit of what we have visibility into. So we can't truly see 100% of all the search queries that are triggering our ads, which is a big concern. And it has to do with privacy reasons. Google's pulled back on allowing us to see that, but it definitely is something that we don't have full control over. And there's concerns about the search query report completely going away. So what can we do to mitigate it? It's being proactive about negative keywords, and then also looking and doing some Google searches for your main keywords and seeing what are the suggested keywords at the bottom of the page, and see, are there any negative keywords that I can glean from this and add to my master negative keyword list.
Yeah, one tool that a lot of people overlook is, I'm not even sure if people are aware of this, is the keyword planner library. So I don't know when they did this, but maybe a year ago, Google started adding features where they will show you keywords that get um, where it gets put into certain categories like brand searches or informational. So those types of keywords don't really convert very well. So you can simply just take those keywords that the keyword planner library is showing you and then upload as a negative keyword library list.
Exactly. And that's something that I started doing sometime last year in order to prepare my campaign for the battlefield when I go ahead and launch.
Yep. Okay. So moving on from keywords, while we're still auditing a Google Ads account, do you do anything with audience?
Yeah, so when I look at Google ad accounts and I look at the audiences, first I try to understand like what's the target demographic that the user's trying to serve. So let's say that we're talking, for an example, like a bankruptcy attorney, and they don't want to serve anyone under like the age of like 24. They want more low income people because that tends to be their demographic. So what I'll do is I'll look into the audiences to see, is what they're trying to target matching up to what we're actually seeing in Google Ads, and is there opportunity to take money away from some audiences that are not converting or audiences that they don't want, and putting it into audiences that they actually want. So in the case of a bankruptcy attorney that doesn't want younger, like anyone under 24 years old, we could be saving quite a bit of budget and reallocating that into another area where, these people, ideal clientele would be searching, if we blocked out the 18 to 24 year olds. So there is definitely some ways to further optimize based off of what we're seeing in the audiences section, and then also pulling back on certain household income demographics too. Like if you're trying to target more affluent, and you have, like, let's say a dog obedience training business, and you charge 3K for training services, you don't want to have people that are in the lower 10% of household income to be clicking on your ads, because it's very unlikely that they're going to be searching. How about you?
Yeah. So quick clarification. They don't have a lower 10%. They do have a lower 50%, which is probably what you
That's what I
meant.
meant. Yeah.
Yeah. So if the campaign's been running a while, which it probably is because we're auditing an account, I do take a look at income household, and specifically, I'm looking at what the cost per conversion is per income bracket, whether it's top 10%, top 20, or bottom 50. If the bottom 50% isn't converting very well relative to the other percentiles, definitely you want to block that out. A lot of people don't really take a look at that. I don't really run into a lot of situations where I have to start optimizing based on gender. That's
Yeah.
never been an issue for me. Usually people know if they should be or should not be doing that. That's pretty obvious. In terms of age brackets, I work with a lot of doctor accounts. So a lot of my doctor clients, they don't accept Medicaid as a form of
Oh,
insurance.
yes.
So if a doctor tells me that, then I say, oh, okay, so maybe we should take a look. We should take a look at age 65 and over and block that out, or at least maybe if you don't want to necessarily block it out because you feel like some of these still might be good leads, maybe just adjust the modifier. Okay. To the extreme end, you can modify by minus 90%. But if you don't want to go that extreme, because if you go by minus 90%, you're basically blocking out all traffic for that demographic. What you can do is just slowly adjust it, maybe adjust it by minus 10%, minus 20 until you find an optimal balance. But that's all I have about demographics and audience.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and jump into settings. What are the biggest setting errors that you tend to find when you're auditing a Google Ads account?
Sure. So I do have a couple off the top of my head. The first one is do not trust any of Google's smart recommendations. Um, I take all of that with a grain of salt, knowing that their artificial intelligence is biased and pushing towards helping Google make more money rather than you, the advertiser. So I don't accept any of their smart recommendations, at least very rarely. Number two, if you're a local business, you may want to look at your local targeting, specifically. Just looking at my notes here, they give you two options: presence or interest in, or presence. So this varies widely from account to account, but if you feel like your cost per conversions are too high and you have presence or interest, maybe you want to consider switching over to presence. I've seen really wild swings in traffic and cost per conversion metrics, especially in really bigger markets, like for example New York City or San Francisco. The reason being is that if you have presence or interest in these bigger markets, you're getting a lot of commuter traffic or tourist traffic, and that could be contributing to why you're getting such high cost per conversion metrics. So maybe if you're looking to lower your cost per conversions, consider switching over to presence only and see how that works out for you. And thirdly, this goes without saying, but a lot of people still aren't aware of this. Look at the Google Display Network and opt out of that. That's nothing but junk traffic. And I would monitor search partners network closely. That can work for some accounts, but not for others.
I think you pretty much touched on everything that I was going to touch on.
Mm.
I'll just one thing I'll just say is just be careful with whatever Google's automatically opting you into. Anything that typically says recommended in the platform, you should proceed with caution because that's typically a setting that is in Google's best interest and not always in your best interest. So please keep that in mind as you're going through putting your settings together for your campaign because I've seen way too many times where things are recommended and everyone just follows whatever Google's recommending. And then, sure enough, some really bad things happen and they start
Yeah,
wasting a bunch of money. So,
really
yes.
bad things.
Yeah.
So let's move on to ad copy. I'll just add one thing and then I'll let you chime in. I would tell people don't pin too heavily, at least in the beginning. When I start writing my ad copy, I don't do any pinning. I just want to see what Google likes to look for and optimize for. Once I'm 1 or 2 months into the campaign, then I may consider pinning. But even then, when you start pinning, you may not get the desired results. So if you start pinning, pin conservatively. But if I'm auditing an account and it's not performing well, whether you're judging by cost per conversions or just you need more traffic, if you feel like you're not getting enough traffic, it could be because you're pinning too heavily.
Yeah. A couple things that I notice when I audit accounts, if you're still using expanded text ads, you should definitely consider
Yeah.
moving them over. Or standard search ads. Expanded text ads has been gone for, I don't know, maybe like 3, 4 years. And I've audited some accounts where it's still in there. So that's definitely something. So migrating to the responsive search ad format, leveraging your real estate. So when I say that, I'm talking about leveraging your headlines, all your headlines and all your descriptions, no more than three ads per ad group. Typically, I do two. I think, anything more than that, sometimes it can be an overkill. Sometimes I look at accounts and I'm seeing like 6 or 7, and I'm like, Okay, well, what's the difference between all of these? Because sometimes they're just repeating the same headlines and descriptions, and there's not really a lot of
Yeah.
like varying factors. And then another thing too, it doesn't necessarily have to do with like the setting of the ad, but sometimes I'll see outdated like years or outdated promotions when I'm running ads. So sometimes clients they're not even checking to see that they've turned off certain promotions that they ran maybe like 1 or 2 years ago. They're running something that is completely irrelevant, or they have like the wrong year that they're promoting. Like instead of 2023, which is the current year we're in, it says 2019. This happened earlier this year, and I told my client, he was so embarrassed. But yeah, definitely review your ads on a consistent basis, because you might find some junk that needs to be thrown out.
Yep.
Um,
Um, moving along. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about bid strategies. Well, we already have a video on that. So if you guys are more interested in diving deeper, I'll go ahead and drop a link in the description below. But let's go ahead and talk about like bid strategies. What are the biggest mistakes that you see when you're auditing with accounts using smart bidding strategies, any type of bid strategy?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple things that come off the top of my head. The first one is there's too heavy reliance on well, assuming this is lead generation, there's too heavy of a reliance on max conversions in the first couple of months of a campaign. I'm of the opinion you should start off with manual bidding first before you switch over to max conversions, because what a lot of people don't understand is the way max conversions and most smart bidding strategies work is that max conversions can only optimize if it has existing conversion data points. And so with new accounts, you don't have any conversions to begin with. So how can max conversions optimize if you don't have any conversion data points to begin with? So because of that, you have to start off with manual bidding and micromanage your accounts. That's number one. Number two, if you've already done that and you feel like either your cost per conversion metrics are too high or you're not getting enough traffic, there are two other issues to look at. Number one, consider having, as a rule of thumb, but not always the case, but as a rule of thumb, I try to have um, my daily spend 2 to 3 times higher than what I should be spending for max conversions. Because if you have a very small daily spend, max conversions may not do much for you. Conversely, if you have max conversions target CPA, your target CPA could be too aggressive. So if you're asking yourself, well, Dean, why are we not getting enough conversions, or why is our performance tanking? It could be that your target CPA is too aggressive. For as an example, maybe the ideal cost per lead is $100, but you set it at $50 cost per lead. Obviously, you're telling yourself, well, who doesn't want $50 cost per lead? Let me tell Google to do that. But the problem is Google is only so smart to begin with. They may only be able to give you those served leads within the first couple of weeks, and then performance completely tanks. So basically, the TLDR is you have to be a bit more pragmatic about it and adjust your target CPA to be higher.
Okay, great. Another thing that I wanted to add on to that is just the whole setting and forgetting approach that a lot of people tend to use. It's, you set a bid strategy and then you never really check on it, and you're hoping that after you get a certain target CPA, things continue to either go down, or that things continue to improve. When I say go down, I'm talking about a lower cost per acquisition, which is a good thing. But of course, we need to monitor it, because just like what we talked about in previous episodes, it can operate like the stock market. Some days go up, some days go down, but over time, it should be improving. So, you need to be monitoring it and making sure that you're making adjustments. And there's more to optimizing a campaign than just putting in a bid strategy. A bid strategy is just going to take into account, depending on what type of bid strategy you're using, certain signals in order to put the right bid for you to hit a certain target, if you're putting a target CPA, depending on what your goal is. So I think what I'd say is the big one of the biggest mistakes that I see is just not optimizing beyond just putting a bid strategy. A bid strategy is not truly optimizing. It's just telling Google, okay, this is this is what I want you to do in order to get me my goal. That's part of it, but there's so much more that goes into optimizing a campaign beyond that.
Yep. All right. So moving on, do you have anything to talk about when it comes to campaign types or budgeting?
Yes. So, in regards to budgeting, let's talk about budgeting first. It's really important to make sure that you are running a campaign with a sufficient budget. I know that sounds super obvious. Some people, some clients or potential clients, they'll come to me and they'll be like, well, I'm spending $15 a day in Google Ads, and they're in a very competitive market, and they cannot figure out for the life of them why it's not working. Beyond looking at the campaign that's broken in terms of having a bunch of broad match keywords that are matching to search terms that are completely irrelevant, ad copy that's completely awful landing page. Let's first look at one of the core issues beyond that. It's you're not funding enough. So if you don't put a sufficient budget in place, you're like driving a car on empty, and then eventually you're never going to get anywhere. So before you even put all this effort into building a campaign, you need to make sure that you have the right funding in order to get to where you need to be. And we talked about forecasting in another episode, but it's really critical to look at how much can you afford, and is this even based off of what you can afford and based off of the average cost per click in the industry, and the specific geography that you're targeting and the competition. Is this even something that you can compete with or compete in? Because $15 a day, you and I both know that that's really not that's not sufficient these days. Not in 2023. I don't think that there's any industry that could get away with something like that. But yeah, I think that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of budgeting. How about you?
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add to that. I think a lot of it's just common sense. Obviously, if you're a personal injury lawyer and your monthly budget is $2,000 a month, I don't think that's going to cut it for you. I would probably say maybe just do more research even before you consider Google Ads and use. Again, I like to use the keyword planner library where you can judge like cost per click and stuff like that, and that will help you decide whether or not paid search is the appropriate routes. So I think we talked about, at least I talked about location. Did you have anything else to add for in terms of location?
Yeah, I think another thing too to consider is potentially adding in location exclusions. So looking at your location reports. So there's many different ways to go about targeting within Google Ads. You can do zip code targeting. That's going to be the most fine targeting that you'll be able to do. County targeting, city targeting, state targeting, country targeting, and so forth. But also keeping in mind too that you can do exclusions. So sometimes I'll see clients, they'll serve like an entire state, but then they just don't want people in like lower lower demographic like cities, lower household income demographic cities. So then you can go ahead and block those out. So yeah, definitely using location exclusions could be another good option for you as well, if you're noticing anything weird. I wanted to ask you a question in terms of like location targeting. If you have the setting set to targeting the presence, so that's targeting that specific location, do you ever see Google sometimes serving the ads outside of that if you're just targeting that location? So let's say we're targeting just California. Do you ever see Google like serve ads like in other states?
Yeah, on occasion. I think generally speaking, they're pretty decent at it, but and I've had this complaint from some clients where they say, Dean, I thought we were only targeting California. Why are we getting traffic from New York? And my response is number one, Google's algorithm isn't perfect. At
Yeah.
least the way they collect IP addresses and such. That's number one. Number two, there are little things like maybe commuter traffic, like someone's in New York traveling to California that they
Exactly.
couldn't pick
Exactly.
up. And again, this is where I have my own library of exclusion lists. I have two libraries, a library of all 50 states and a library of all of the countries in the world. So if I'm just targeting California, I block out the other 49 states. If I'm targeting all of US, then I block out the rest of the world. But if I'm simply targeting, let's say, a 5 mile radius around, let's say, LA or something like that, then probably have to do some work where I start selecting counties and start blocking that out.
Yeah.
But that's the way I exclude geographic locations.
Yeah, sometimes I get clients. It's very rare, but sometimes clients will be like, "Well, I'm only targeting Los Angeles. Why am I getting calls from Las Vegas?" And I tell them the same thing. Google's platform is not perfect sometimes, and sometimes it could because of that setting, it takes people who could be commuting, right? So from one area to another or frequently visit. So it's people in or frequently visit that location. So you might be getting some of that traffic, coming through that might not be the most relevant, but there's only so much that you can do about that. So just like what you were saying, you can put location exclusions. Another pro tip too is adding those locations as negative keywords, because some people might actually type in, let's say, chiropractor in Las Vegas, even though they're based in LA, they might be looking for a chiropractor in Las Vegas because maybe they're planning to move there, or they have
Mm.
a family member that's seeking a chiropractor in Las Vegas. So it's very common too. To see stuff like that where people are searching, they're in one location but they're searching outside of that location. That's another pro tip on the locations front.
Yeah, that's probably good for like real estate. Like if someone's looking for a real estate agent in another city.
Yep.
Good tip. Moving on, landing pages. Any thoughts on landing pages?
We have a whole episode on landing pages, but let's talk about, I guess, the biggest issue that we see when we're auditing accounts: sending traffic to your main website. If the website is, not optimized for mobile, if it's not optimized for conversions, definitely leveraging landing pages is going to be really important for you, especially if you're in the local lead gen space. Not uh, not having a way for people to contact you on the landing page just seems like a way that uh, people are just, advertisers are just wasting money. Let's see, not having your unique value propositions, using too many stock photos so people aren't relating to you. Anything
Social
else?
proof.
Yeah, no
Social
social
proof, yeah.
proof. Anything else?
Um, yeah, just a couple of things with social proof. I've actually read some interesting studies from copywriters where they will put smack dab on the landing page a crap ton of social proof in like one area. For example, uh, someone like me, usually I'll just put down 3 or 4 screenshots of like testimonials. And by the way, I actually do screenshots rather than copy and pasting the text from, let's say, Google My Business. Like, let's say a client
Hmm.
got a really good review on Google My Business. What most people do is they'll copy and paste that review and put it onto the landing page. What I like to do is actually take the screenshot, because what happens psychologically is that some consumers are very skeptical, so they think you could be just making up
Making
these
it up.
reviews.
Yeah.
It happens, not all marketers are honest people. Um, so the way to kind of circumvent that is just take a screenshot. So I'll do that. I'll take a screenshot of, like, especially if with clients who have hundreds of reviews. So I'll go to their Google My Business that says, oh, 300 reviews with 4.5 star rating. I'll screenshot that, and that really speaks
Volumes.
greatly about
Mhm.
how good of a business they are. Um, so that's something about social proof. In an age of generative AI, where a lot of people are using Chat GPT to generate their copy, I would say be careful of that. I don't think, rule of thumb again is, like, if you're operating in a business where there's high context, meaning people know what you do already, like for example, people know what a chiropractor is, people know what a physical therapist is, then you don't necessarily have to write gobbles and gobbles and gobbles of words about your business on the landing page. You could just resort to like very short, concise, punchy, bulletless copy that's scannable. So that's a couple of things off the top of my head.
Yeah, great. All right, let's talk about devices. When you're auditing accounts, what are the biggest mistakes you see using specific devices on Google Ads?
So, general rule of thumb, when I take a look at devices, if you're operating in B2C, you're going to get a lot of mobile traffic, and hopefully that mobile traffic is converting well. Conversely, if you're operating in B2B, you may get a lot of mobile traffic, but mobile traffic doesn't convert as well. So take a look at your desktop. If mobile traffic isn't converting well and you're in B2B, I would simply adjust a modifier. So maybe adjust it by minus 40%. So that way you bring in less traffic for mobile and more traffic for desktop. Um, Outside of that, I would just make sure your landing page is properly optimized for mobile as well, across B2B and B2C.
Yeah. Something else I'd add too is generally I don't see results come from tablet. Some clients will run it and we'll look at the data and we'll see whether or not we should just completely remove tablet. But generally, it's not really a device that tends to convert that well. Tablet's more of like a research based, like, type of, device, but it's not really a device that people will use if they're serious about wanting to actually become a lead. Just that's from my experience. So that's just one of the things. Take a look at your devices and see, and you can actually do a complete negative 100 bid modifier to completely block out to completely block out a tablet. And yeah, that's pretty much it on the devices.
Yep. All right. And then last but not least, what are your thoughts on conversion tracking? My
Oh
initial
man.
thought is I find that this is the biggest Achilles heel for both agencies as well as do-it-yourselfers. They don't quite, I mean, they kind of understand what conversion tracking is, but they don't know how to implement it because it takes a very technical mind to work across both Google Analytics, Google Ads, Google Tag Manager, and your landing page, on top of whatever third-party software you're using, such as CRMs.
Yeah.
This is like the biggest Achilles heel. I don't know how. There's probably a deep dive conversation into itself for another video, but
Yeah.
conversion tracking is definitely a must, and a lot of people just don't do it well.
Yeah, and then the problem with that is you're blind to what's actually happening in your account. I audited an account maybe 2 or 3 months ago where it was like a waxing and tanning salon, and the it was uh, we were he was tracking just phone calls from ads, like the mobile phone calls, but he wasn't tracking like the actual like landing page, like people that went to landing page and called from the landing page. He wasn't tracking form submissions, and I was asking him, how are you optimizing? And he was like, oh, I just look at cost per click. And I was like, well, is
Mm,
that what your goal is? And he was like, no, it's leads. And I was like, okay, well, then we need to be tracking the leads better, because right now you're optimizing to the wrong thing. If you're just optimizing towards cost per click, sure, you can bring the cost down, but what's happening to the leads? And he has no idea what's performing and what's not. He's just, putting in a few $1,000 a month, and it's kind of like a spray and pray method. And then you don't really know what to do. So he's just kind of let it run, set it and forget it type of approach, and just looked at the cost per click and looks at his impressions. He's like, oh, well, the impressions are going up. That's a good thing.
yeah, yeah,
But you and I both know that impressions doesn't mean anything. Impressions just means that, hey, you're getting more eyeballs on your ads. Your ads are being served more, but is it going to the right place? Are you targeting the right demographic? And if you're targeting the wrong demographic, it doesn't matter if you have a million more impressions each month. It really doesn't matter. So that's what I'll say on conversion tracking. If you don't have it in place, you're operating with lots of blind spots.
yeah. I would also add, just to close this out, if you're measuring phone calls, I would take a look into phone call analytics.
Yeah.
That's a really big must. It gives you actual data. It gives you more insights into what's going on with your traffic. So a lot of times, the biggest question clients have of me before we begin is, well, Dean, or even when we start, well, Dean, okay, we're getting more traffic, but how do I know they're coming from Google Ads? How do I know they're not coming from Yelp or my TikTok account? So proper
Oh,
call analytics can take a
mhm.
look at this and not just show you where it's coming from, but the quality of the calls as well. So, for example, I've seen accounts where I've taken them on board. They're getting, hey, 30, 40, 50 conversions a month, or AKA phone calls. But a lot of these phone calls are very low quality, like lasting only 30 seconds.
Right.
So unless you have call analytics in place, you don't know what's contributing to these low quality calls. Is it the keywords you're selecting? Is it maybe you have Google Ads call extensions enabled, which generally speaking encourages um, one-off phone calls, right? Maybe it's something with your landing page. Maybe it's something with your campaign. So by implementing call analytics, you have deeper insights into your phone call leads.
Yeah, that's great. Great topic to wrap things up on this front. Yeah, but thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.